Alright, is your dog scared of loud sounds like fireworks, garbage trucks, delivery trucks? Today we're talking about sound sensitivity. My name is Camille. I'm with Positive Futures Dog Training and Behavior. And with us today we have Jenko, who's going to help us with sound phobia or sound sensitivity. She gets very nervous when she hears loud sounds. So we're going to help her work through some of that. Today, you ready? Good girl. A lot of times the signs for noise sensitivity can be very subtle. So most dogs will seek refuge inside the house. Usually they'll try to stand away from windows or where the sound is coming from. A lot of dogs who don't like thunder might try to go into a bathroom when it's thunder. They won't want to go outside. Or they'll be very hesitant to go outside. When you go outside, they just want to come right back in. Pacing is also, when they just keep going up and down and they can't settle. Whining, being very affectionate and clingy and jumping, and you can tell it's not the I love you, let's play. It's kind of like freaking out. Versus noise phobia, which is full-blown panic attack, where your dog will very clearly be frantic. They usually will try to escape the source of the sound as much as possible. They'll be shaking, shut down. So right now we're in that sweet spot where they're not having an extreme reaction to it, but they're not comfortable with it, because that's the spot where we can kind of help them through it. Because if they do have full-blown panic attacks and actual noise phobia, you really need to have your vet or a veterinary behaviorist involved. Those are dogs that need to be medicated. Because training alone is not going to help. Just like with human, phobias are real illnesses that you can't just wish away or train away. You do need to have that medical help. But with dogs who are just before then, where they get anxious but not frantic, we can kind of have training intervention and get them desensitized to those sounds and teach them that those sounds actually predict happy, good things instead of things they should be worried about. Good. So what we're going to do to help Jenko with her sound sensitivities is play some of the sounds that she's worried about at initially a very low volume, and gradually increase the volume of those sounds while pairing those sounds with things that she enjoys: play, food, petting. And one of my favorite apps to work with this is the Soundproof Puppy Training. It's great. It has tons of different sounds that you usually will encounter in real life and that dogs usually find worrisome. Bikes, garbage trucks, trains, vacuum cleaners, traffic, crowds, other animals, lots of different things to choose from. And then I will play the sound, usually at a pretty low volume so that my dog can hear it barely, so that my dog hears it but is not worried about it, and as they get better we'll gradually increase the volume until it gets to full volume. So what we're going to do right now with Miss Jenko is we're actually going to use the bike sound because we haven't worked through it just yet, and I'm going to put it on really low volume, set it on the table, and have her do a couple of easy skills like hand targeting, sit, and play, so that she does fun things and she gets rewarded while the sound is playing in the background. And depending on how comfortable she gets, we'll then increase the volume for her. Yeah. Good. So one of the things that I'm careful with Jenko, is that when she gets anxious, she tends to get clingy and very jumpy like this. And I want to make sure that's not something I reward. Yes. Good girl. So I'm typically waiting for a few seconds of sit or touch before she gets her treat. Yes. Good girl. Yes. Good girl. And this I like right there, where she's sitting fairly calmly. She is hearing the sound. Yes. Good girl. Yes. Nice. And then usually you'll hear me say good girl in a very happy tone right after the sound has picked up. So right now we're doing bikes. And there's low. So sometimes you don't hear anything and then the engine revs up. And I want to make sure that when she hears the engine rev up, good girl, she gets extra support from me. What a good girl. And that's kind of what I'm looking for, right? The bikes are revving up, she's in a down, she's pretty still and calm. She's not jumping on me, she's not trying to run away. She's giving me nice attention, her tail is wagging, she's nice and loose. You can see her ears moving around as she's listening to the sound, but she's not overly concerned about the sound. That's nice. And by asking her simple cues like touch or sit or look, things that she can do really well, it helps keep her brain focused on thinking versus just reacting to the sound. And helps her get more comfortable and more relaxed. Nice. It's also helping her pair or associate the sound with a positive outcome, right? Bike revs, yay! She gets lots of attention from me, which she obviously really enjoys. And so over time, oh, too much. Yes, good girl. You have to get it over. Good girl. She will either learn to ignore the sounds because they don't really predict anything bad happening, nothing she should worry about. Or she'll anticipate something good happening. Yes, good girl. Cookies. Too much. Good, so that you see how we worked through that with Ms. Jenko. Something to keep in mind during the process, when you're working on getting your dog comfortable with the sound, make sure they don't have uncontrolled exposure to it. So with Jenko, obviously I'm not going to go walk her next to a busy highway where she's going to hear bikes and cars and trucks all at the same time at full volume, because that would be way too overwhelming. So we do want to make sure that they're not exposed to the trigger or the sound they find worrisome at full level until they're ready for it. So be mindful of that. Another thing that we want to be very careful about when we're working through this is our dog's body language, right? Because that determines how quickly we up the volume or if we have to decrease the volume. We do want our dogs, again, that very sweet spot of they hear the sound, but they're not frantic about it, that they can still use their brain, which is why I like to do touch and sit and look, because they're simple tasks, but they help me gauge how focused my dog is. So if it's really easy to get a sit, I know my dog is in full thinking brain, they're not really concerned about what's going on. If I need to ask a few times, or if it's really difficult, or if my dog does, I'm sitting but not looking at you, I know it's too much, and I might have to reduce the volume or increase distance away from my phone so that we're getting a little bit less intense of a trigger. And we will link to lots of different body language pictures and videos so that you can kind of see all the subtle signs of anxiety, so that you can keep track of those and make sure that you address them and adjust the sound and volume accordingly. Another way that you can do this pretty easily as well is during meal times. So I like to feed all my dogs out of food puzzles and slow feeder bowls. That usually means that their meals take about 10-15 minutes to eat. And that's usually when I'll play the sound at very, very low volume. Because again, when they're eating, especially with dogs who love food like Jenko does, I don't want her to get sensitized that, oh my God, I'm eating, this sound is loud, I'm freaking out, but I need to eat, and I'm just gonna gulp the food, and then it gets worse and worse. I really just want her to barely notice the sound so that it's just some weird background sound, no different than a fan going on, you know, in the room, or the AC going on, things that she's not worried about because she hears them all the time. So you can do that, but be mindful of getting the volume even lower when your dog is eating, because they're not as likely to give you stress signals or clear stress signals when they're eating their food versus when you're trying to get them to work with you. It's a lot easier to see, okay, my dog is freaking out because they're not responding to the sit cue versus when they're eating, and they'll just go, I'm freaking out, but I have to eat. So those are things to keep in mind. All right, so in short, when you're working on desensitizing your dog to sounds, a couple things to keep in mind. First one is keep the volume really low, lower than you think initially. It's better for you and your dog to stay too low for too long than trying to get too loud too quickly, because then you desensitize your dog to the sound. The second thing is also keep track of your dog's body language. If they show any signs of anxiety, that means you need to reduce the volume or stop your session there. And also keep sessions really short, usually 5-6 minutes is what I do, and then we move on to something else, usually play session. So that we end on something really fun and positive for our dogs. Because again, you don't want to keep them stressed for long periods of time, and then get them sensitized to those sounds. And the fourth thing to keep in mind is dogs generalize poorly. So you do want to help them. If your dog is worried about, garbage trucks, it's a good idea to also get them used to traffic sounds, train sounds, buses, delivery trucks, things that kind of sound the same but are not exactly the same, because it's likely that they're also worried about those types of sounds, and practicing in different areas of the house as well, and then practicing a little bit outside so that they learn that those sounds always predict good things and happy things no matter where they are, not only when they're inside the house in their safe space, and then when they go outside it's but we're dying now. So keep those things in mind, and then feel free to reach out to us if your dog has any sound sensitivities and you need some help.